If you've ever driven along Colorado's Front Range, you know that view. You've got the sharp, rising peaks of the Rockies on one side and the sprawling plains stretching out on the other. It's a landscape a lot of us see every single day. But what if I told you that landscape is basically a history book with a story that's thousands of years deep? Yeah, take a look. It's that familiar view, right? The mountains, the city, the trails we love to hike on the weekends. But the real story, it's not just what you see on the surface. It's buried just inches below the soil. It's a history of survival, of adaptation and change that goes back for millennia. So let's start digging. In this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers of this landscape we think we know so well and reveal that hidden history. We're about to see that the story of this place isn't just about the last 150 years or so. No, it's a story that's more than 5,000 years deep. To read this story, you can't just go to a library. You have to look at the ground. Archaeologists are kind of like detectives, piecing together the past from all these physical clues that were left behind. Every single stone tool, every little fragment of a clay pot, every animal bone, it's like a word in a sentence. It tells us how people lived, what they ate, and how they survived right here thousands of years before any modern city was even a thought. So, what are these clues? Where do we even find them? Well, it turns out they're all around us, preserved right there in the earth, just waiting for someone who knows how to read the language of the past. And each of these little pieces tells a different part of the story. You've got flaked stone tools. That tells us about hunting and preparing food. Pottery fragments, that signals a huge shift in technology. Suddenly you can cook and store food in a whole new way. Animal bones are literally a menu from the past. And hearts, those are the exact spots where families gathered for warmth, for food, for community. But the really incredible finds, the rarest of the rare, are the perishable artifacts, little bits of wood or hide that almost never survive. And that's why certain places are just so important. Sites like Magic Mountain near Golden or Franktown Cave over on the Palmer Divide, these are genuine archaeological treasures. The cool thing about a place like Franktown Cave is its geology. It's a huge rock shelter which protected all those fragile artifacts from the elements for thousands of years. These places aren't just collections of stuff. They are true time capsules, with different layers of soil, each representing a whole different chapter in human history. And the timescale we're talking about here, it is just immense. We're not talking centuries, we're talking millennia. The story kicks off over 5,000 years ago with early hunter-gatherers. Then, around 2,000 years ago, a major shift happens when pottery shows up. Fast forward to 300 years ago, and you have the ancestors of tribes like the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho calling this land home. And then, in 1859, a blink of an eye ago, everything changes with the gold rush. It's just a tiny, tiny sliver at the very end of this vast timeline. Okay, so with these clues in hand and with this huge timeline in mind, we can start to move past just what people used and really start to understand how they actually lived their lives, day in and day out. So, archaeologists often talk about two basic strategies for survival. First, you've got the forager. This is all about mobility. You're constantly on the move, following seasonal resources. But the collector strategy is different. This involves setting up more permanent base camps and then going all out during peak seasons to gather and store huge amounts of food. Think of it like this. Foraging is like grabbing takeout every night, while collecting is like doing a massive grocery haul to meal prep for the entire winter. It's a huge shift from just surviving the day to planning for the whole year. And the stuff they were collecting was incredibly diverse. I mean, based on the evidence from sites like Magic Mountain, the diet was rich and varied. You had big game like mule deer and bison, smaller animals like rabbits, and a huge variety of plants. People ate everything from cactus fruits and pads to the seeds from native grasses, pinyon nuts, and wild fruits like chokecherries and plums. This wasn't just scraping by. This was a deep, sophisticated understanding of the local ecosystem. And that deep understanding went into their tools, too. They knew the landscape inside and out. A perfect example is Parker petrified wood. It's this high-quality, almost glass-like rock you find in the Palmer Divide. People knew exactly where to find it, and they prized it for making super sharp, durable tools. This wasn't just random. It was a sophisticated knowledge of geology passed down through generations. But then a new technology shows up that would change pretty much everything. And it wasn't a new tool. It was a new food: corn. The arrival of agriculture in this region was a massive turning point. It offered a predictable, storable food source unlike anything they'd had before. Now, you'd think that with a reliable crop like corn, life would have gotten a whole lot easier, right? Less risk, more food security. I mean, it sounds like the perfect solution. But the story that's written in the bones, it tells us something very different. And honestly, it's pretty surprising. And this is where the detective work gets really fascinating. Skeletal remains from the periods where corn became a big part of the diet sometimes show this condition called parodic hyperostosis. Basically, the skull bone becomes porous, kind of like a sponge, and that's a classic sign of severe iron deficiency anemia. Turns out, while corn gives you calories, it lacks key nutrients and it can actually block iron absorption. So the shift to agriculture, while it provided more food, might have come at a really steep cost to people's health. It was a major, major trade-off. So for thousands of years, the story of this land was one of slow, gradual adaptation. But that all changed. With the arrival of Euro-American settlers in the mid-1800s, the pace of change becomes, well, breathtakingly fast. The landscape itself is completely and permanently transformed. You know the roads you drive on every day? A lot of them aren't new at all. They actually started as ancient trails, pathways worn into the earth by Native American tribes who were just following the most logical routes through the terrain. Then, gold prospectors followed those same trails, widening them for wagons. After them came toll road companies, then the railroads, all building on top of the same corridors. The route of a modern highway like US 285 is really just the final layer on a path that is thousands of years old. And we can't forget just how difficult that transformation was. As the historian Jerome Smiley put it, these early wagon roads were absolutely brutal. He said they were as steep as stairways and not much better than unimproved goat paths. I love that quote because it just brings to life the sheer physical effort it took to turn a simple footpath into a transportation artery. And the pace of that change was just unreal. In less than 100 years, the region went from foot trails to railroads connecting it to the entire country. You had logging booms in the 1880s that stripped entire hillsides. Then the automobile shows up in the 1920s and opens up the mountains to tourism and development. And then, after World War II, the Cold War defense industry, places like the Rocky Flats plant and the Martin Company, triggered the massive suburban explosion that really defines so much of the Front Range today. So, after peeling back all these layers, from ancient hunters to modern highways, what's the big picture? What does all this really mean for us, living in this very same landscape today? Ultimately, the big takeaway is this. The ground beneath our feet is a library. It doesn't hold just one story, it holds thousands of them, all layered one on top of the other. It's this incredible record of human resilience, of people constantly innovating and adapting to a changing world, from inventing the bow and arrow all the way up to building an interstate highway. Our history is physically part of the world all around us. And that leaves us with one final, pretty important question. People 5,000 years ago, they left behind stone tools. People 150 years ago left behind railroad grades and old wagon ruts. So what trace will we leave? What story will the archaeologists of the future read about us in the soil of this ancient and layered landscape? Thank you for joining us.